heroes and there's legends. Heroes get remembered, but legends never die. Only your heart can. Never go wrong.
Welcome to QTB Legends, where legends of the gaming industry come to tell their story. My name is Nick, and I am joined once again by Roger Hector. How are you doing today, Roger?
Doing fine so far.
Yeah, the last episode was fantastic. Just to recap for our listeners that may have missed it, if you did, you better watch the first episode because this is a two-parter. We talked about a lot, right? Your time in the gaming industry with Atari, Bally, Electronics Arts, even some time you spent there at Disney, and a lot of just little things along the way. And for most people, that would be more than enough to say, hey, that's my gaming career. But for you, it's only part one. Really part one of three, right? Because you've got so much going on today.
Oh, so true. It does seem like it's been going for quite a while.
Sure. But on this episode, we are starting things off at your time at SEGA, and I'm very excited to get into that. But before we do, I want to make sure we talk about what you've got going on right now, because, and again, we talked about this on the last episode, your upcoming game, or rather, as of right now, is released, Venture Valley, which is a collaboration between the Singleton Foundation and Discovery, right?
Yes, yeah, there actually are several more, that are involved at this point, but we do have it. It was originally founded and conceptualized by Will and Carrie Singleton, who were the founders of the Singleton Foundation. They're two wonderful people who were basically inspired to have a fun, entertaining video game that helps players learn about entrepreneurism and financial literacy. They founded the Singleton Foundation and have sponsored Venture Valley, which is a completely new kind of fast-paced, multiplayer, multi-platform, esports style game where players compete against their opponents and the clock. It's featured both competitive multiplayer and single-player campaigns, and it's all about starting businesses. So in every business you start, you're the boss.
It sounds like a lot of fun, and I love the educational aspect, and I want to circle back to that in a second. But, I think one of the really interesting things about this is that when I think of a competitive game, I think of, shooter games or anything like that. But really, Venture Valley is kind of half sim game, half strategy game. I don't think I've ever heard of a competitive sim game before, but there's kind of an esports presence that's kind of going alongside the launch of this, right?
That's true. No, we have it basically is set up and structured to work as a single player game, but I personally tend to think the real fun potential is when you get to join in with your friends and compete against them in specific challenges that you get to establish, or if it's in an organized event like a real school esports event, a tournament. It's set up to allow, like schools, to be able to set up and run tournaments that will provide real winning prizes, so that you can, even though the game itself is completely free, there's no cost to it at all. It's on PC, Steam, iOS, and Android. There are no in-app purchases or ads in the game.
Right.
But it is possible to win real world prizes. So that's kind of it's a little bit of a unique reversal of what game players typically wind up competing against. They wind up, having to pay money to get good at a game and maybe win something back. In our case, it's all free, and you can still get the goodies.
Yeah. Now, Roger, this game was created by and large as a way to help students develop financial literacy skills. I'm curious, like, what was the genesis of that? What caused you to identify that need that ultimately resulted in this game?
Well, it's kind of like I said earlier. Both Will and Carrie Singleton, who are the founders of the the whole foundation that is driving this, that is their particular passion, is to try and teach those skills, and allows for young people to learn these skills, because typically they aren't taught in school. There is a real need, a social need, for young people to be able to do that, and this is really their mission, is how they've defined what they want to do, is they want to help promote uh, entrepreneurism and financial literacy to the entire audience of young people, let's just say high school and college age.
Right. Now, again, to all of our listeners and viewers, you can learn more about this game by going to venturevalley.game.com. And I have to say, one of my I think the coolest things about it that gets me excited to try it with my family is the fact that not only is it cross-platform, but between mobile and Steam, like the PC version as well. So, I mean, you got the laptop, you got the desktop, you got some smartphones. You can get everybody in on this and kind of make a family game night out of it, right?
That's exactly right. We do that all the time, of course, and the just to allow players to play with their friends across different platforms are all of that is kind of an amazingly unique experience. And I will also say, rather challenging technically, at least for us.
Yeah.
That's not a small task, but it's really turning out great.
Yeah, being cross-platform, it's kind of an expectation in gaming these days, but I mean, I'm sure on the back end we don't appreciate the amount of work that actually goes into it.
Oh, so true. Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
So your time at Sega, was really monumental because we were looking at, already the kind of the peak. Well, what most people would have thought was the peak of Sonic the Hedgehog with Sonic 1 and 2, and all the spin-offs. But then of course Sonic 3 is coming along, and that's when you began as the VP General Manager at the Sega Technical Institute back in 1993. So you're already walking into a well-established IP that was already finding its groove with Sonic 2. And many classic platform enthusiasts like myself would agree that Sonic 3 is one of the best, if not the best, 2D Sonic game. So, what was it like walking into an established franchise like Sonic, and how did you improve on and help oversee that to create an even better product than Sonic 2?
Well, one thing for sure, we had the original Sonic team on board, and they were working on Sonic 3 at that point. So one of the things that, for me anyway, was to not get in their way, but we also had to communicate throughout the rest of Sega as to, here's what's coming, here's what we want to plan for. There's there's all of that that is just normally part of the communication that's necessary to work with the marketing and work with the different various groups. Um, it turned out for me that one of the challenging parts of this was that Sega had already experienced such great success with Sonic 1 and 2 that they had decided, hey, let's, we need to have a new Sonic game every year at Christmas time.
Wow.
And so I had to work with the team, the guys, the leaders, the original Sonic team leaders, Yuji Naka, Hirokazu Yasuhara, who was the lead designer, Naoto Oshima, Kunitaki Aoki. These were sort of the core Sonic team. There were a number of other really strong Japanese teammates in there, and even some help from or additional contributions from the non-Japanese group there. But yeah, they were off on a very good track. One of the issues that had to be dealt with was they wanted Sonic 3 to be so massively successful that it had to be a huge game. And the original concepts for Sonic 3 turned out to be much more than any realistic team could produce in time for Christmas. And so we wound up deciding that we needed to split it up. because it was just way too much content. There was too many worlds, too many special events, too many characters. All this was originally conceived by the team, and we had to split it up. But it turned out that yes, it worked out. STI did have, I think, as I mentioned, a group of game creators from North America and from Europe. Sega wanted the games to be created for the entire world. And so having this international group working together in one place was the idea. When I got there, Sonic 3 was well underway, but far from being finished. They wanted Sega wanted a new Sonic game following for every Christmas over the next several years. That was kind of the mission that was handed to us, and that's one of the things that I had to sort of orchestrate. So the subsequent Sonic games after Sonic 3, were all had to be planned out well in advance. And so the teams all worked together, and we had, Sonic and Knuckles and Sonic Spinball and a variety of different types and styles of Sonics. But I do agree that Sonic 3 was truly one of the best of that entire series.
Absolutely, especially when you factor in just the revolutionary concept of being able to interlock, your different games, and the way that Sonic and Knuckles then came in, later on and ended up introducing all these new ways to go back, right? That lock-on technology. It was like the golden age of just the add-ons, right? Because the Genesis, it took so long to move on because it was always, well, here's the 32X, here's the Sega CD, here's a million ways that we can take your existing console that you already own and give you a little bit of extra firepower. That had to be a very interesting thing to oversee from your perspective when you saw, now people talk about the infamous just tower of of Genesis things you can stack on top of each other.
Well, the whole concept of Sonic and Knuckles starts to it takes on a little different perspective when you know that was all created, or much of it was envisioned as a part of Sonic 3, but it was just too much. Sonic 3 was so big that we knew we had a couple of games worth of content there. And so Sonic and Knuckles, and then the whole concept of connecting the characters in both sides is really an extension of the whole idea that they were originally conceived to be as one game. And they kind of ultimately did turn into that in a way.
Yeah, absolutely. And now your tenure at Sega also, you did see the eventual end of the Genesis era and the beginning of, like I said, the 32X and even the Sega CD. Although the Sega CD not quite as popular here in the States. But then you even moved into entirely new systems, right? Like the Sega Saturn, which was kind of a turbulent time there for Sega. Can you share some insight? Because I know on the US side of things, there was some disconnect, right, between the way that system was being launched and whether or not there was really a market for it in the States.
Yeah, it was. It really was a challenging time. It's always challenging and exciting to move from one successful hardware platform to something that's technically new and more powerful. I mean, that was certainly true at Sega, but one of the things that was existing inside of Sega at that time was that there were different internal game hardware design teams that were competing against each other. And so it's not like the company went out with one design to turn into the next big thing. There were multiple versions of it that had different microprocessors and were really different. And they were competing pretty far into the actual finished development of the hardware. And so the winner is the one that got produced. But there was another, there was a whole other set that was sort of not pursued. And that made it difficult to, or at least it seemed to kind of delay the opportunity to be able to give information to game developers, particularly outside the company. Here's what the new hardware is. Here's how it works, and here's some software that'll help make it work and all of that. Sega sort of fell behind in that particular section of it. So yeah, it was challenging. It was a tough time for the company.
Right, and of course, eventually the move to Dreamcast, and then of course the infamous, consolidation of Sega into the software business, which a lot of people may not know. The only reason why they survived that was because of a single angel investor that, essentially on his deathbed said, "Hey, I'm going to forgive this loan," and allowed Sega to kind of carry on. But you really got to see Sega in its prime. I don't think anybody can dispute that. When Sonic was just blowing our minds at high speeds, on these games, and blast processing was still a thing we were talking about. It was truly a golden era. Now, obviously, I had to lead with Sonic, but I mean, Sega's so much more than that. Were there any other titles that you were especially proud or fond of when you were working there?
Oh, there were several actually. Like I say, we had a very first class group. You didn't get in the door and get a seat to sit in if you didn't really know your stuff. And so STI we created. One of my favorite games there was a game called Comic Zone.
Nice. Yes.
Good old Comic Zone was originally created by one of our designers, Peter Morwick, and he had this amazing story all by himself. That regardless of everything else that was going on, he came from Eastern Europe as a young man, all by himself, didn't speak English, with the intent of coming to STI in the West Coast and being able to work at Sega. And the fact that he was able to successfully accomplish just that kicked him into gear to create the concept for Comic Zone, which was taking a comic book, kind of an old school comic book format of individual window pictures on a page, and connecting them as locations that you could work through as part of an interactive kind of adventure game. He showed me that one day. He just says, "Hey, Roger, let me show you this." And I said, "Well, what you got?" He says, "Well, it's an idea for a game." And I'm looking at this, and he completely illustrated it by hand himself.
Yeah.
And did a beautiful job that it was just amazing. I said, "Gosh, this is really a great idea. So let's build it." Well, we didn't have a team staff available to do that at that time. So it took like, I don't know, a year or a year and a half or something, but eventually we did get a chance to start it. And that game always struck me as being part of that larger story associated with a young guy with a lot of passion and a lot of talent at the same time.
Yeah, Comic Zone is something that you would think someone else would have tried to emulate or create like a spiritual successor to, but it really was one of those just very it popped, and the idea, you see it as a kid, and you're like, oh my gosh, what kid wasn't reading comics that also was playing Sega games? That just that yeah, there's that juxtaposition makes perfect sense for a game. Yeah, genius.
Well, there was that. There was a game called the Ooze, which was a game that had a completely uniquely different kind of lead character that was really an algorithm that basically moved around on the screen. You were that character, and you got to work your way through various different types of screens by oozing your way around through little gaps and little holes and rolling through. You constantly changed your form. It was very unique and different for its time. We also did a game called a coin-op game, believe it or not, at STI, called Die Hard Arcade.
Yes.
And Die Hard Arcade was a collaborative project between STI in the United States and Sega of Japan Arcade Group, and those guys had tremendous talents, and this was kind of an opportunity where we could blend together and So that was one of the really unique qualities that Sega had at that time in those days, was a kind of a passion to blend Western and Asian talent to see what could come up. Those are
Yeah.
cool projects. There were others too.
Oh, of course. I mean, we could go on for hours about every individual entry, but there's I think the big ones, Sonic and some of the ones that mean something to you are very important. I will ask you one follow up question. In 2022 and beyond, obviously Sega has had suffered some blows, especially with their arcade division shuttering for the most part there in Japan, and just a further consolidation of what it was already just a giant. Looking back or looking at today, do you see a path forward for Sega that really lets them get back to those glory days, or do you think that it's just going to be, them taking the few IPs they have that work and just rolling with them?
That's a good question. I actually haven't been directly connected to to the organization in for quite a number of years.
Right.
So I think it actually really depends on who's leading, who's running the ship, and who is bringing the various talents and creative insights that are necessary to build next generation things. Uh, the odd, one of the atypical mistake that's made in that situation is they try to just repeat and regrind out new versions of old things, and for the most part, that doesn't tend to be very successful. So whoever is actually leading it at this point, I would be, thrilled to see them be successful and make it happen. They have amazingly valuable intellectual property, and so the IP. I was going to tell you a story about when we wanted to motivate the team, the original core team, to get the game out by Christmas. We invited the key members of the team, gave them airline tickets and hotel reservations to attend the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade in New York to
Okay.
see the giant Sonic balloon that was
So
introduced
great.
that year.
Yeah.
And they had that they had to get it finished, or else they wouldn't be able to go.
Yeah.
And they did that, and that was just amazing. That was so cool.
Yeah, I mean that balloon became such a part of the Macy's Day Parade. I remember watching, I think it was a Jingle All the Way, and in that movie, they're watching the Macy's Day Parade, and even the Sonic air balloons in the movie. So many people just combine those two things. So that's so great that Sega has become such a part of American culture. And I think back to, or rather in recent times here, Sonic Mania, which really paid homage and demonstrated a mastery of the understanding of why those classic Sonic games are so beloved. And even now, Sonic Origins is slated for release, which is going to take a lot of those games, like your Sonic 3 and Knuckles, and present it in a widescreen format. So Sega definitely knows, there's a market right now to go back and really say what was going on there and how can we make it better. So we have you to thank for that.
Well, I just played a role, but there was a lot of talented people there. I will say that I had to sit and go see the opening day of the new Sonic 2 movie.
Okay, what'd you think?
Hey, I very original, all
Yeah.
kinds of goofy, crazy stuff. I had a great time. I enjoyed it.
Could you have ever imagined Jim Carrey playing Dr. Robotnik? I
No,
mean, what a genius casting call that I would have never guessed.
no, that was wonderful. I was kind of blown away. I brought some kids with me, and they all loved it. So we had a great time going to
That's
see
great.
Sonic
Yeah.
2.
Love it, love it. All right, well, as much as I'd love to stay on Sega for hours and hours, you've got so much more career to talk about. And this is a big one. You were the president of Universal Studios Digital Arts Division from 96 to 99. And this part of your career had you doing a lot more than just making video games. So tell us more about what your day-to-day was like there.
Very interesting. Uh, Universal Studios was kind of similar to Disney, where I had worked before. They're two, internationally known companies. They both have theme parks and movies and TV studios and record labels, and so they're kind of in the same business. And a big part of the reason that Disney reached out to me and I worked there was that they wanted to establish a base of talent and expertise in interactive entertainment, because that didn't exist in Hollywood at that time. And so, and it turns out when I did leave Sega, I was recruited by Universal to kind of come in and do the same thing. The idea was, the mission was to create gaming talent and collaborate and share tech knowledge across the other divisions of Universal. So it wasn't just purely focused on making a series of games, because I spent a lot of time kind of working with the leaders and the creative people in other parts of Universal. I had an office both in Universal Studios, in Hollywood, and in Silicon Valley, and I bounced back and forth. We set up game teams in San Jose, and I recruited some great game talent that I'd worked with before. People like Dennis Coble and Lee Actor, who have their own long-standing game careers. They came in and we put together digital arts. We had fun creating and launching Universal-based property games like Xena Warrior Princess, which was that was based on a popular TV show at the time, and it was a natural for making a game out of. And the unique part of something like that was that I had the opportunity as the division president to go in and sit down with the original creators and the lead actors and actresses that are in the TV show, and we brainstormed together to see what could we do with a storyline that would work both for the TV show and for a video game version of it, that sort of thing. And that was, I enjoyed that. That was really a lot of fun.
That's such a special opportunity that just doesn't happen anymore unless a celebrity is directly involved in the making of a game. In our interview with Don Traeger, he talked about working with Michael Jordan and Larry Bird one-on-one to literally learn about their stats and make sure that they approved of these games. And there you go for you as well, getting to work with these big name celebrities on their games and get their input. There's focus groups like that I don't think they happen anymore, Roger.
I'd be shocked. I would be amazed, because these things tend to get sort of politically complex.
Sure.
With all of the contracts and all of the various responsibilities. But that was fun. I originally picked up those ideas at EA working with Don Traeger. So
there you go. Yeah, it just carries. It all comes around. Well, Universal had their hands on a lot of IPs in the 90s, with many of them later changing hands that some people may not even realize, like Crash Bandicoot. Are there any particular titles that, you mentioned Xena, any other titles that you're proud of publishing in hindsight that maybe people don't realize was attributed to Universal Studios?
The projects that I worked on directly, I knew all about Crash, and that was all great, but I was focused on doing some other things that were more collaborative within the actual movie and theme park entertainment business. So I didn't actually deal with those guys, but the Universal owned quite a lot of IP, and some of it was classic old things like the Universal monsters, Frankenstein, Wolfman, Dracula, all of those characters that were, have been around since movies way in the distant past. I was in a role kind of behind the scenes, kind of helping develop games and licenses around some of the classic properties of Universal. But I will say that Universal was going through a real variety of organizational changes at the time I was there. They were I had 5 different bosses in 3 years.
Wow.
And you know, when you're there was only 7 divisions of Universal at the time, and I was one of them. But man, when there's so much turnover, that it became very difficult to make plans that you can actually enact on. And when my contract was up with Universal, I was kind of happy to step out, and I came back to Silicon Valley.
That's right, and that's a great transition here into the next part of your career because yeah, I guess the turmoil and the red flags there it kind of sent you off in a different direction, and for the better because I don't think many people in the gaming industry can lay claim to the next few stops that we're about to land on. So you spent some time there at the Enterprise Broadcasting Corporation. And you had some ambitious ideas for entertainment and advertising delivery, right? So tell us some more about your time there.
Well, that was it was a startup, and I've done startups before, and in this particular case, uh, the concept was to it was really an exciting startup, uh, and it was in what was called the dot-com era. If you're old enough to remember the dot-com era, that was when online retail selling was just getting started. uh, Internet, broad distribution of the internet into people's homes was just getting started. So our concept was to create a new kind of shopping mall retail store that actually looked like a movie theater in a shopping mall. So all of the big screen entertainment was in high def, which was completely new technology. If everything that you go see in a movie theater today is in high def, there was zero high def available at the time in movie theaters. So we had this very, very unique opportunity to introduce high definition um, hardware presentation, theatrical presentation on large screens with multiple. We had Dolby was a partner, and they created their own audio system for these special theaters that were in malls. Uh, all of our format programming was short formatting, so it was all like maybe 5 minutes long with a couple of minutes gap, and then there'd be another show. And so admission was free. Each comfortable leather chair in the theater was a reclining comfortable leather chair with a touchscreen monitor that sat right in front of you, through which you could purchase things that you saw in the shows, so
Wow.
that when the different shows played, certain things would be available to buy, and you could slide your credit card through through the slot and purchase things that would be shipped to you through online fulfillment, which was brand new. All of that was brand new at that time. So it was truly a new concept that we called retail entertainment, and it was really it was a lot of fun. We actually built several theaters and produced all kinds of interesting, sort of fun and unique, uh, uh, entertaining shows about things like, Chrysler would offer a new car model for sale, and
Yeah.
they'd show people in the car, or Disney, Disney cruises were
Okay.
featured on the great big giant screen.
Yeah.
And fashion, heck, Macy's would be able to present what's great at Macy's right now, right around the corner inside the mall. And so there was all these different subjects that were coverable, and it was a lot of fun. I enjoyed it quite a bit. It was, as is true for all startups, there's a kind of a vulnerable period. We did raise financial capital to actually execute and do all this stuff, but turns out shopping malls started having all kinds of economic problems.
Yeah, that might have been where the bad timing was. So I'm just thinking like the concept is ahead of its time in the retail space. It's ahead of its time in the entertainment space,
Yep,
and ahead of its time in that it's short form content, which nowadays that's whatever even Disney is putting out their little 5 minute shorts. So it seemed like
exactly.
if you could have had malls just hang on for a little while longer, right?
If it held on for just a little bit, we'd have, we could have done better. But it was quite an amazing experience, and it was a lot of fun.
Well, the unique experiences certainly don't stop there, and this is such a very cool part of your career with your time at Antaros Coachworks. And for those of you that are watching right now, you are now seeing on the screen a very cool looking sports car. Why don't you tell us about this, Roger?
Well, when I was a little kid, I loved to build model cars. And when I got older, I wanted to design cars. That was sort of my personal career ambition. I went to college. I got a General Motors scholarship. I got a BS degree in automotive design. But when I graduated, Detroit was laying off employees. And so I had to just find something else. And that's really what led me to to go to Atari and start a whole different career path. So, but I am an artist and a designer and a creative guy. And many years later, uh, I decided to go ahead and design a sports car because I always wanted to do it. Sort of a classic style. I took a couple of years to do this, and eventually I showed it at a great big car show, and I was shocked that many people wanted to buy one. So I started a company called Antaros Coachworks, which was just me. I was the only employee, and I contracted with a factory to build a production sports car that was to the specifications and the designs that I all did. It was all carbon fiber and very high performance and actually pretty sophisticated as a car, but it was what I'd wanted to do a long time. And they just got started building the cars that I had sold, but unfortunately, they went bankrupt and they had to close their factory. And there had only a couple of the cars had been completed, so this makes it a limited edition. That's my positive spin. It's a limited edition sports car, and I'm lucky to have one of them today, so I get to drive around and have some fun in it.
What a cool claim. Do you know how many of these are believed to be in existence?
I'm gonna say there were 4 prototype cars made and 2 production cars. So there's a total of 6. I was
Wow.
going to build a bunch more, and I had sold more, but that's kind of the way that it all worked out.
That's incredible, and it's based on the C6 Corvette, is that right? Your
Yeah,
design
there's a
inspiration?
C6. Yeah, there's a C6 Corvette chassis, suspension, uh, uh, engine. Although it's been supercharged and modified, and everything is tweaked up, so it's actually quite a hot rod for sure.
Wikipedia is saying 500 plus horsepower, so you weren't messing around with this thing.
Oh yeah.
So incredible and just a very fun destination. And that's so fascinating to me that this was the gaming was kind of your backup, right? You went to school for something different and you made both happen in your own way. So very cool.
Yeah, it was kind of a dream project. I had time on my hands, and I thought I'd see what would happen. I had no intention of actually manufacturing them, when we got started. But once you're started, you go, well, let's see what
You've got the factory line, right? Let's go.
happens.
Amazing. Well, from there, you headed over to Bandai Namco Games of America as the senior VP of product development. And during your about 4 year tenure there, a lot of games were published. We were just talking about this on the QTB podcast of so many games come out published by Bandai Namco that, especially in Western culture, people don't attribute to the publisher. Over 120 games were made during your run there. So, what was it like overseeing such a rapid fire cycle of game releases from a North American perspective?
uh, well, yeah, Namco Bandai they recruited me to take over the game production for North America and Europe. So the games that I oversaw were the games that were targeted for North America and Europe. So uh, the Japanese group was the one that was cranking out huge quantities, and it was really focused on and targeted for the Japanese market. But it was a blast jumping back into games, after being in cars.
Right.
And like I say, it was very busy. One of the reasons that they wanted me, I believe, was that there were a number of struggling projects
Mm.
that were, they were partially completed, and there were issues sort of not working out or falling behind schedule, all that sort of stuff. And I spent my first period reorganizing and changing the structure of teams and the designs for several projects that were struggling at that point. And I even had to restart some of them. But once we got past that, that was my initial focus. That's kind of why I was hired. But once we got that underway, then really it was fun creating original Western focused games like Enslaved or Afro Samurai or some of those kinds of games.
Yeah.
Those were uniquely targeted and really a lot of fun. It was fun projects.
Yeah, a lot of westernized games, and one of the things I think is very interesting about Bandai Namco, especially during this time, is and maybe correct me if I'm wrong, but how it differed from Sega is that Sega really had a better focus, like you had mentioned, on crossing over Western and Eastern culture, right, with their staff to create games that didn't need a whole lot of work to localize. But I look at Bandai Namco, and just in that 4 year stretch you were there, it's not just Pac-Man and Soul Calibur. We're talking Taiko no Tatsujin, Gundam Wing games, Naruto games, even Japanese tokusatsu like Kamen Rider. We're getting adaptations. So what was it? Were there any challenges for you that you faced when you had to localize these titles for American audiences?
Well, as it turns out, because I did have my Sega experience, I kind of was familiar with how to do some of this. Uh, I, I've never claimed to be completely bilingual, but I did initiate English language classes for English speakers. I'm sorry, for Japanese language classes for English speakers, so that we could actually get a little bit more well communicated. Although we didn't actually do foreign localization in in the U.S. at that point.
Okay.
So they did the Namco Bandai Japan did the foreign localization. Every project I took on was new and focused on the Western market. So there were some cultural disconnects, as to be expected, but nothing was really too difficult. And I feel like I was really lucky to work with very strongly talented people there. So that was it was overall a very good experience. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, that's incredible. Now you had mentioned Afro Samurai among other. Were there any other games in particular that you have memories of or stories about while you were working there?
uh, Gee, the the stories probably would apply to the projects that had to be completely restarted,
Oh no.
and I do remember having to shut down a game developer, which is something that I've been a game developer. I know what that's all about, and it
Yeah.
was really tough. And that's kind of a situation where a game developer that we had been working, that we had contracted with, uh, stopped developing the game and started doing other things with the money they were being paid. And so it literally turned into a situation where we had to go down and yank the project from them. And those were for me for literally, I think, the first couple of years I was trying to take care of and fix and I think successfully. Ultimately, everything did make it to the market, but it was some of them were quite a bit tougher than others.
Sure. Now, one of the last stops here on your for this episode is your time at Video Plus LLC. You were a co-founder of this, and this is prior to your work, what you're doing now at the Singleton Foundation. Tell us a little bit more about the company, what it creates.
Uh, there's actually a couple of companies in here that are kind of blended. They're both startups. They're both technology, creative engineering and design, with a touch of entertainment attached to them. So you get it. Really, as a creative engineering and design business that consulted on a variety of projects with other companies. So we were acting as consultants in interactive entertainment and like the theme park business. Uh, it was it was fun dealing with all of that, but at this point I can't really talk about it because it's still in development and still out there. Video Plus was a subsequent LLC that I founded. It was really one of my last, you know, stops before working with Singletons, but it's an extension of the previous work. It includes social media, things like an app that I created called Top Track. That is it's an iOS and Android app. It's in the App Store right now. It's designed for musicians to promote their own music through social media. And we have tens of thousands of singers and bands from all around the world using it. So they're actually sharing, they can download the app and they can share their music through social media very easily that way. And that's been fun for several years. We've also focused on a very sophisticated new type of video technology that is kind of in a patent pending mode right now. It allows viewers to actively interact with stories and characters in recorded video that combines real-time computer-generated graphics like a game, but into what is essentially a movie. So it is something that's new. It isn't out yet.
Okay.
There's the potential for it to become maybe something big. We don't know yet. But we've already been playing poker with the aliens in a Star Wars bar. I can say that.
Oh man. Oh yeah. Don't want to tip your hand too much, so to speak, but that's very exciting. And yeah, I mean, if your past history is any indicator here, Roger, you shoot for the stars with every project. So I can't wait to see more from what comes from that. And of course, speaking of projects, again, reminder to our viewers and listeners here to check out Venture Valley. Available now. You can go to venturevalleygame.com. The links to that will be in our show notes or description if you're watching this on YouTube. Roger, again, thank you so much for coming on the show today. Before you go, and this is as a lifelong fan of Sonic, there's no one here who's better qualified to settle this feud. Who's going to win in a fight, Sonic or Knuckles? Roger Hector, what's the answer?
Oh man, that's a tough one.
Pop quiz.
Ouch. Ouch. I can tell I'm going to get beat up by the Sonic team, no matter how I go on that particular one. I would have to say that I wasn't shocked and surprised by the Sonic 2 movie that Knuckles was one hell of a tough dude, but Sonic ultimately led the charge out to the finish line.
I think a lot of it's tough to argue with, though. So many people love Sonic and Knuckles, and the way Knuckles came into the franchise. It's Sonic's world. We're just living in it, right?
Very much so, and it keeps going.
It does. It's so cool to see the Sonic cinematic universe playing out, and the success of that first movie. Really kind of paving the way, I think, and other ones like Detective Pikachu and the new Mortal Kombat movie really giving us finally a golden era of video game movies, because for so many years there were some challenges, right? Where Nintendo was like, no, you can't have our IPs anymore, and everyone else, may have made a movie, but it was just okay. That has to be fun from your perspective.
Well, I tell you, I saw a little Hollywood news report that the Sonic 2 movie that just came out has been the top earning video game movie of all time.
Yeah, not surprising. Not
So I'm
surprising.
going,
Yeah.
all right.
There you go. Amazing. Well, again, Roger, this has been such a great interview series. Thank you so much for joining us. And yeah, can't wait to see what incredible things you come up with next.
Hey, thank you much. It's been fun. I've enjoyed it, and I look forward to seeing all the other good stuff that you guys are doing.
Thanks so much. Yeah, well, to all of our listeners and viewers, thank you so much for checking this out. And we'll see you next time on QTB Legends.